I'm good. I hope all of you are also doing great and studying great. So today we are going to discuss elements of company law. Okay. So again, company law is a very important subject for all the company secretaries. So if you are going to become a company secretary, which you will be in few duration or a shorter version uh, after some years. So then the most important aspect which people look up to is an expertise in company law. So many company secretaries do practice in company law. This is one of the core areas where company secretaries do practice, or in employment also they are considered that the company secretaries are having good knowledge in company law. So I hope now you understand that how much importance this subject has got, and how much it is core to every company secretary. So this is what we're going to discuss today about company law, that what are the key provisions of company law, and what is a company and so on. So this is a revision for which we're doing. So again, I'll explain you on the concepts and take you through all the concepts once again. So just concentrate, focus, because this is a very important subject, and it is sometimes difficult also for you to understand because it has got a very core legal language in it. But that's how we are going to understand, and this is a stepping stone for us to take further exams in company secretary course. Okay, so please focus. So the company is what we know is derived from the Latin word which means company, means coming together, and panis is for bread. So basically, the merchants used to gather in the festival gatherings and used to discuss the business matters, and that's how the company word gained a lot of importance. And then, of course, we have a law around it, which is Companies Act. So in India, we have the recent Companies Act 2013. Earlier, there was a Companies Act 1956, and so on. So there were various statutes at different point of time governing the provisions of Companies Act, and that's why the most recent which we have is Companies Act 2013. So I hope my voice is audible to all of you. Is there a problem? Okay, so I'm hearing mixed yes and no. So what you can do is you can check the connection at your end. I know the networks are very poor and we have been using a lot of networks. So just try to help yourself with the network or switch and try. Okay. What is company in terms of the Companies Act? So if you see section 220 of the Companies Act 2013, it says company means a company incorporated under this act or any previous company law. Now what does that mean? It means that whenever you refer a particular entity as a company, it has to be a entity which is registered and incorporated under the company law. So that can be the earlier law. So it can be the 1956 law or any previous company law or today's Companies Act 2013. So if that company, now for example, Reliance Industries, it has been incorporated a long time ago. So it is still a company because it doesn't change the status because it was incorporated some years back. It of the company because it was incorporated as per the previous company law. So that is what it means. And if a newly company which is incorporated under the Companies Act 2013, that is also termed as a company. So please remember, uh, company, the registration and incorporation are the very key words out of this. If there is a FAQ for you that there is an association of persons, and they incorporate, and they mention the venture they called it was A Company Limited, then there should be a ring which should be clocking in your head that no, this is not a company because it is not incorporated or registered under the Companies Act. So just any business which is not incorporated or registered will not amount to company. Just merely by saying we work in a company, but it is not a company registered and incorporated under the Companies Act, then you cannot term that entity as a company, because the most essential features are it has to be registered and incorporated under the company law. I hope this is clear. That so that's why there is always a question that whether OPC is or sole proprietorship is equal to OPC. What is your answer to it? The question which I answer is no, because one person company means essentially a company registered and incorporated under the Companies Act. Sole proprietorship, on the other hand, is not a company. It is a business, like the shops which we see. Those are not companies. Those are, if I, for example, start tomorrow a shop. So that is not, does not mean that I'm the one person which is kind of running the business. That does not mean that I'm a company. No, one person company means essentially it is a company incorporated and registered under the Companies Act. The only difference is it is carried by, there is only one member, that is, there is only one shareholder, but that is not equal to a sole proprietorship. I hope this is very clear to you. Whenever the word company is there, it has to be a registered and incorporated entity. Okay, so now we have seen this definition and we'll jump straightway to the characteristics of the company. So these are the characteristics of the company. The first is corporate personality. What is corporate personality? The company is vested with a corporate personality quite distinct from individual who are its members. Now, what does that mean? Its assets are separate and distinct from those of its members. It is also different person from the members who compose it. Now, what does this mean is, now in a company form of entity, there are three keywords. What are the three keywords? Company, shareholders, and directors. Shareholders means what? Those are the investors, the people who have invested, the people who have put in the money in the company towards the capital of the company. So those are shareholders of the company. The other concept is what? The directors of the company. The directors or the board of directors are what? The people who are responsible for the management of the company. Okay, so they are collectively called as board of directors and individually called as director. Okay, so the person who is appointed as a director in a company to take care of the affairs of the company is called as a director, and collectively such directors are called as board of directors. So we saw company, we saw shareholders, and we saw directors. Now, can you say that this company is equal to shareholders? The answer is no. The company is a separate entity distinct from its shareholders and directors. So, even if it is one person company and a company has entered into a contract with some other entity, okay, say A Limited for that matter, then in that case it does not mean that the contract and that OPC, so OPC, say for example Mr. B has incorporated OPC, that is BOPC Private Limited, okay, and that BOPC Private Limited has entered into a contract with Mr. A. So can you say that the contract has been entered by B with Mr. A? The answer is no, because the contract is entered by A OPC Private Limited. So basically the OPC company has entered into a contract with another individual, that is not equal to individual entering into a contract, because these are separate entity distinct from its shareholders. Meaning the OPC Private Limited and the member or the shareholder of the company are two distinct persons in the eyes of law, because the company is a legal fiction. Now, can you bring here and say, can you say, if I say that, oh, see, I've brought today TCS for you to meet, you will laugh at me, right? Ma'am, how can TCS come next to you? Because TCS is a company which is a legal fiction which exists only in the eyes of law. It is not a natural person like you and me. So, a company is an entity which is a separate personality. It has got a separate existence. It is a corporate personality which is distinct from its shareholders and directors. So, a company is not equal to shareholders, is not equal to board of directors. So, any contract entered into by the company is not, that does not mean that it is entered with the individual shareholder or the individual director. So if the, can I say now, for example, Mr. Ratan Tata, say for example, own the Tata groups, he has some stake in Tata companies, for example. Now, can we say that the assets of Tatas are is equal to Mr. Ratan Tata's assets? No. The assets of the company are the assets of the company, not of the shareholders and not of the directors, right? So that is what the corporate personality means. The corporate personality is distinct from the individual or its members. Okay, I hope you get this, because this is a very important feature of the company. And that's what we have seen in Salomon versus Salomon. Now we'll go next to the concept of limited liability. Now, what is limited liability? So, limited liability means, for example, the privilege, let me just yes. The privilege of limited liability for business debts is one of the principal advantages of doing business under the corporation form of organization. Now, what does that mean? So, what we have seen is the company being a separate person is the owner of its assets and bound by its liabilities. The liability of the member as shareholder extends to the contribution to the assets of the company up to nominal value of shares held and not paid by him. So what does this mean is, we have seen in case of a sole proprietorship, the liability is unlimited. Now what is unlimited liability? We mean by unlimited liability that in case of a sole proprietor, what we had observed in our earlier classes, that whenever if I open a shop, okay, and I now run that shop, and unfortunately that shop is running into losses, and I'm now unable to pay the debts of the creditors which I had taken. So if I'm owning a sari shop and I've taken lot of saris from a merchant, and now I'm unable to pay the debts of that person, and because I've suffered a lot of losses, and I'm unable to pay the debts. Now now if I tell that person, the creditor, that, oh, I don't have the money because I am not able to sell many saris and I've incurred losses now in it. So here, if I've incurred losses, I'm unable to pay your debts. Now, sorry, the what would the person would say? Okay, you have a vehicle. You give me that. I'll take it, because you're not able to pay the debts. I'll take your vehicle away, which you own. There is a car which I see. You give me that car. I'm good with it. What is happening here is the personal assets. Okay, my personal assets are also getting attached. What we call it as attached, because I'm unable to pay the debts, because in case of sole proprietorship, Dipti and Dipti's shop are not two different people. Dipti and Dipti's shop are one person, that is, it's one and the same person, right? But in case of a company, the liability of the shareholders can be limited, in the sense that personal assets will not come into picture if the company is limited by it has got a limited liability. Meaning what? If I've invested only 1000 rupees in a particular company, the maximum thing which can happen to me is I will never get that 1000 rupees back. Okay, I'll never get that 1000 rupees back. But that is the maximum thing which can happen, that how much ever amount I have invested, the max thing which can happen is I'll never get it back. But my personal assets, my personal property, my bank other balance, or my jewelry, or my car, or anything which is personally owned by me, will not be exposed to the liabilities of the company, even though I am the 100% owner of the shares of the company. So that's what we have also seen in Salomon versus Salomon, that the assets of the company are the assets of the company, the liabilities of the company are the liabilities of the company, and the liabilities of the company are not of the liability of the members. So the personal assets of the members are not going to be exposed to the liability of the company. So if 1000 rupees, so what example is being given here? A holds shares of total nominal value of rupees 1000 and has already paid rupees 500 as part payment on the time at the time of allotment. He cannot be called upon to pay more than 500 rupees, the amount remaining unpaid on its shares. So if the company goes into liquidation, or if it is unable to pay debts and etc., the max amount which Mr. A is going to lose is that 1000 rupees, and the max amount which he can be called upon to pay is rupees 500, because he has not paid it yet. So 1000 was the nominal value of shares. Out of that, 500 he has paid. So only 500 is the amount which he will be called upon to pay. He will not be asked to pay more than rupees 500, that is the entire 1000. So once he pays that rupees 1000, beyond which this will not be called upon to pay. So his only liability is up to rupees 1000. That's it. Beyond that, nothing will be payable by Mr. A. So this is what we understand by limited liability, that the liability is limited to the extent of your investment in the shares. That's it. You will not be exposed to any further liability, like in case of a sole proprietorship, or like in case of a partnership. I hope you get this. Any questions on this? Because this is the core and key aspects of the company. Okay, great. I'm happy you all are understanding. So now we will move on to perpetual succession. Now, what is perpetual succession? So what does perpetual succession means? An incorporated company never dies except when it is wound up as per law. Now, what is this? So, the hypothetical example which is always given is that even if there is a nuclear bomb, that cannot destroy a company, even if there is a plane, wherein all the shareholders have sit in and all the directors have sit in and they're going somewhere, and if that plane unfortunately gets crashed, that is not going to destroy the company. Okay, that is what is called as a perpetual succession, meaning people can come and go, the shareholders can come and go, the directors can come and go, but the company remains. And that's why if you see, there are a lot of companies which are 60 years old, 70 years old, 80 years old. How is that possible? Because the company entity is remains. It is come by way of a legal fiction, meaning what? Like I told you at the beginning, the company comes into existence only when it gets registered and incorporated. So, meaning the company comes into existence only when the process of law is applied and then you get a company. Right? You cannot say, oh, I've got 50 companies. No. You trigger the process of law, you use the process of law to incorporate a company, right? So when you incorporate a company by kicking the process of law, that is the Companies Act process, then you get a company. So if you have to close that company, then also you have to take the help of the law, and then only you can wound up the company. So that's why, even if for example, a company does not have any business, like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, there are zero transactions in the company, but still in the eyes of law, the company exists. Okay, because it has not been wound up as per the process of law. So the way the company comes into picture by a process of law, similarly, for the winding up, also the process of law has to be followed. Then only the company gets wound up, and after winding up, then the existence of the company ends. But even if no, dormant company is different. Okay, dormant company is different. Dormant company is still a company because uh, it has not been wound up. Once it is gets wound up, then it will become a then the existence of the company ends, and then you can say that yes, the company has finally ended, because what we are seeing is the company never dies except when it is wound up as per the law. That is called as perpetual succession. The company goes even if the shareholders dies, the nominees, the successors of those shareholders come into picture, and the company continues. So for example, in case of Reliance Industries, Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani is no more. But is Reliance Industry not there? No, Reliance Industry is there. So the sons of Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani, like Mr. Anil Ambani and Mr. Mukesh Ambani, are now the shareholders of the company. So the people come and go, but the company remains, and that's what is called as the perpetual succession. Okay, I hope you get this. Separate property is what we have already seen, that the company being a legal person and distinct from its members, it can own property. So that's why we see that we say, oh, this company owns the factory over here, or the premises or rental premises or acquired premises, a bungalow, a flat, or office, assets. It can employ people, it can do charity work, so many things. So it's a separate property. It has the whatever is the property of the company is the property of the company and not of its members, that is shareholders or the directors. So for example, if I own say 10% stake in TCS or Infosys, can I say, oh, this building of Infosys is mine? Can I say that? No, I cannot say it, because even though I'm owning 10% stake, that doesn't mean the assets of the company are the assets of the members. The assets of the company remain the assets of the company only, and not of its shareholders or directors. Now we are going to see what is transferability of shares. So the capital of the company is divided into parts called shares. So we have seen, if you remember, I had given you the example of what is share and what is share capital. So again, if you want, I can explain. Share means, so basically if you assume a pizza, okay, and the portion of it, like you decided this quarter is mine, this is yours. So the share, now if this is a share capital, what is share capital? The amount which is put in for towards the capital by the shareholders. So if 1 lakh rupees is the share capital of the company and I own 25% stake in the company, so that is the share. So 25% is my share in the company, and that's why it is called share. Okay. So if you own 10%, then you have got 10%. If you own 50%, then the remaining is yours. 50% is yours. So that is called as the share in the company. So the shares are said to be movable property and subject to certain conditions, freely transferable, so that no shareholder is permanently or necessarily wedded to the company. Because what we are seeing is the company has a perpetual succession. So shareholders can come and go, but company remains. So that's why. Now, how the company is going to remain forever if we are saying it is perpetual in nature and it has got a perpetual succession? How does this is possible? It is possible because of transferability of shares. So the heads of the owners of the company can change. Now, for example, like a land, if I bought a land, now I am the owner of the land. If I sell that land, the Mr. A becomes the owner of the land. So likewise, now the land remains as it is, right? Land does not get anywhere or go anywhere, but the land does not go anywhere, but the owner of the land changes. Similarly, in the shares get transferred to each other and the ownership changes, but the share remains as it is. So if it is 10,000 rupees share, it can have different owners. Like that shares, if I own the shares, I transfer it to my sister transfer it to somebody else. So the ownership of the share changes, or it gets transferred from one person to another, but the share remains as it is. So the shares, that's why it is called as a movable property, because it can change its heads and there can be multiple owners to it. So you can sell in the open market and the real market and so on, in case the company is a listed company. So that's why if you see the news, right, and there is a strip below that this share is going up, this is going down. What does that mean? The share prices are going up and down of the companies, and that is what the price at which you buy or sell the shares. And that is the value of that shares of a particular company. So that is what we have understood by transferability of share. Okay, any questions? Let me check if there is any question. Okay, no questions, I believe. Yes, shares are generally, what is the valuation? It's the money which is being given generally. Yes, so if you trade it on the stock exchange, you get money in terms of shares. So there is one question, where what if I own 60% shares of company and die accidentally? There is no will, note or anything. Okay, I hope that doesn't happen, but an hypothetical question. So here what is going to happen is, in case a person dies, there is a nominee of the share, or which can get, and if it is succession also gets involved into picture. So what happens if the person is a Hindu? So we'll not go into details of it, but there is a succession act for Hindus or for Muslims, and how things will go if the person dies without having a will. So then the ownership, or as per the succession act, and nominee also can be placed as a who can be the nominee of that shares, and accordingly the process of law kicks in. Now, capacity to sue and be sued, I guess this is very simple, that the company can sue anybody and anybody can sue the company. As simple as that. So, we see that there can be various suits. It can be related to copyrights, it can be related to trademark, it can be related to a land property, it can be a consumer dispute. It can be various ways by which a company can be sued and company can sue any other person. So to sue means to institute a legal proceedings against a person, that is in a normal layman's language what we call it, is pe case kar diya, that's what we call, so a case on a company. So to institute a suit or initiate a legal proceeding, a company can do. Similarly, any person can sue the company as well. Contractual rights, we have seen that the company can be a contract, can enter into a contract, and the contract of the company is not that the contract of the shareholders, like what we have seen. I had given you the earlier example. Separate management, we have seen. Limitation of action, we have seen. Voluntary association of profit, we'll see in detail. Termination of existence is also we have seen. Now we'll go to nationality and residence. So it is established through judicial decisions that a company cannot be a citizen, yet it has nationality, domicile, and residence. The reason being, we say, right, it's a Gujarat-based company, it's a American company, it's an Indian company, it's a multinational company. The reason being, that's why even though it's not a citizen, like we have seen as per the Citizenship Act, the company is not a citizen, but still it can have a nationality, like it's an Indian company, it's a Chinese company, it's an American company, because the way it operates and the incorporation where it has taken place, who is the owner of that company, and so on. So that is what we understand, that though it is not a citizen, but it can have nationality, domicile, and residence. Now we're going to understand again the concept of corporate personality and how it is, what is this lifting or piercing through the corporate veil. So corporate veil, veil means what? It's a burqa, what we call, or it's a facade, or it's not, it's hidden basically under some kind of this veil. So what does this mean? So a corporation is clothed, yes, parda, that's right. So a corporation is clothed with a distinct personality, yet in reality is an association of persons who are in fact the beneficial owners of the property of the body corporate. Now, what we have understood so far is that a company is a separate entity which is distinct from its members and directors. But if we have to look it from a different perspective, can you say that, oh, this company did not do this, now this company did not follow the court order? In a reality, is that the company doing it, or the people who are acting as a director of the company are not doing it? So when we say, oh, this company did not do the road, now if there is a road which was to be built by a company and they have dig up the road for some cables to be put in, right? And we say, oh, this company did not do this road properly. Now, is that some, when we say that it's not being done by the company, what does it actually mean? It is not being done by the people in that company who are responsible for uh, the affairs of the company, isn't it right? Because company is not a natural person who can do certain things. It is obviously the people behind it who has not done it. So it can be the employees of the company, it can be the directors of the company, and so on. So what the point over here is, so when we say that a company is a separate legal entity from its members and directors and so on, that a company has got a corporate personality, like it is different from its shareholders. But what the what this lifting or piercing through the corporate veil means that whenever, now we know that this is a advantage or this is a feature or a basic feature of a company, that a company is a corporate different personality, it is a different person, it owns different, its assets are its own, or likewise. But when the question arises that when people misuse this concept of corporate personality, that is where when the lifting or piercing through the corporate veil appears. Now, for example, if the directors of the if the company is has invited to subscribe from the public, so the company gives an invitation to the public to subscribe its shares. Now there has been many IPOs, that is initial public offers by many companies. Now for example, after taking the money from the public, either the company has to allot the shares or it has to return the amount which for which they have not allotted the shares, right? They cannot just keep on money and they have not given you the shares of the company. Now the question is, if that company is not giving back the money to the share to the public at large, and they have not allotted the shares as well to them, so basically what is they are doing is they are enjoying the money but they have not allotted the shares. Now, if the directors say, oh, we are not doing anything, the company is not paying it, can that be the right statement? The answer is no. It is the people, that is a board of directors, who are responsible to give the money. There are some natural persons involved, right? If you say, oh, the company is not paying, what I can do? The company is not paying. The company is an artificial person, it is not a natural person. There are natural persons who are behind the company and running the affairs of the company. They are the agents of the company. They are responsible for the affairs of the company, right? So here the court is going to look into the matter and see, oh, this is not the company which is doing. This is you who are not doing it. You, the natural people, are not doing it. And that is what is called as the lifting or piercing the corporate veil. The court is going to look into the veil, it's going to pierce into the veil and see who are the natural persons who are taking advantage or taking this disadvantage of the personality concept, misusing the concept of corporate personality, and hiding behind the corporate personality concept, saying, oh, we are not doing it, it's the company who is not doing it. So that is where the court is going to check that this is not the company who is doing it, this is the people who are not doing it. And then the court is going to punish such people who are using or hiding behind that corporate personality veil. And that veil is going to be pierced by the court or lifted by the court to check whether who are the individuals who are not doing that proper things. Okay, so that is meant by lifting or piercing the corporate veil, where a fraudulent and dishonest use is made of the legal entity. The individuals concerned will not be allowed to take shelter behind the corporate personality. So then their liability is exposed. So for example, yes, there are so many cases like where Mr. Ramalinga Raju, can it be said Satyam did fraud? No, Satyam did not do the fraud. Mr. Ramalinga Raju, who was behind the company, who was taking care of the company, did the fraud. So it is a natural person who has done the fraud. It is not the company who has done the fraud. Can it be said, oh, Satyam did the fraud? No, Satyam is what? It's an artificial entity. It is the natural person behind that company who has done the fraud. So, if the court is not able to identify, it is going to punish and lift or pierce the corporate personality and look that who are the real people who are doing it. So basically, sometimes people misuse this corporate entity for not paying taxes or not following the court order, then the court is going to check that who is the real person who has not done it, is the natural person, and then the corporate personality is going to be lifted or pierced, and then the natural person behind it will be punished, or whatever is the consequences can follow. So if the wrongdoings, you cannot take an advantage of the corporate personality and do the wrong which you are doing is not allowed. So if it is for tax purposes, you are doing some jhol jal and you're kind of defrauding the people and not paying taxes, and you open many companies so that your tax is you're evading the taxes, then of course the income tax authority can say, oh, this is not the company, you are misusing the concept of corporate personality, and now you will have to pay the taxes. It's like that. Okay, so this was upheld in Premlata Bhatia versus Union of India, wherein the premises of a shop were allotted on a license to the individual license. She set up the whole own private company and transferred the premises to that company with the government consent. She could not remove the illegality by saying that she and her company were virtually the same person. So basically, whenever you are misusing the corporate personality, that is where you are going to see that the courts may lift or pierce the corporate veil. Okay, so I hope you get this. So there are many companies where many basically cases where the courts have disregarded the corporate personality and said, hey, you are the person behind that company who are acting, and now you will be punished. You cannot use the company as a concept and do your transactions. So for example, if I've entered into a contract where I've been said that no, you cannot do the similar business, okay, you cannot do the similar business. Now I'm into employment, I've signed that you cannot do a similar business for which you were employed, and now I opened a company I incorporated a company in my mother's name. So I'm saying, oh, I'm not involved, it's my mother's company. No, it's ultimately I'm doing everything, I'm just putting the name of some other person and giving a different look to it as if it is not owned by me, and it's a company which is doing the business. So the courts have disregarded this kind of structures, and they look into who is the real person, who is behind this, and then of course that can follow the consequences. Yes. Now we have seen all the concepts. Now we will quickly go through what is the difference, how it's different from the company and partnership. So in case of partnership, it is not distinct from several person, partners and the same person. Whereas in case of a company, it is a distinct legal person, what we have seen. In partnership, the property of the firm is the property of individuals. It's of the properties of partners. And in case of company, we have seen it is of the company and not of the shareholders or the directors. Creditors of the partnership firm are creditors of individual partners. But in case of company, what we have seen, the creditors of the company are the creditors of the company and not that of the shareholders. Partners are the agents of the firm, but members are not the agents of the firm. Okay, the shareholders are not, they cannot go and bind the company into any contract like that a partners can do. A partner cannot transfer his share and make the transferee a member of the firm without the consent of the other partners. But in case of a company, the shares can be ordinarily transferred. Restrictions on partners' authority is contained in the partnership contract or the partnership deed, what we typically call. Whereas articles are effective because the public are bound to acquaint themselves with them. The articles of the association of the company are, these are public documents and anybody can view that. A partner's liability is always unlimited, whereas shareholders' liability is limited either by shares or by guarantee. A company is legally required to have its accounts audited annually by a chartered accountant, whereas accounts of the firm are audited at the discretion of the partners. So, in case of a company, statutory audit is compulsory. Every year, the company has to get its accounts audited. Okay, unlimited liability means, again, I've already explained. Guys, please concentrate when I'm already explaining the concepts. I can't take the concepts again and again, okay, due to the paucity of time. So when I'm taking that concept, please concentrate, okay. A company being a creation of law can only be dissolved as laid down by law. So like I already explained, as you incorporate a company, the company can be wind up only by following the process of law. What is company and HUF? Company consists of heterogeneous, it can be, there can be various members, but in case of a HUF, it consists of the joint family members. Is a HUF the person who controls or has the authority in the HUF is called as a Karta, and there is no such system in the company. So the Karta is the head of the family generally, and that Karta is responsible for all the affairs of the HUF, but that is not so in case of the company. In case of a company, the company, there is a board of directors. A person becomes a member of HUF by virtue of birth. So just mere by birth, the person becomes HUF, but that doesn't happen with the company. If that person wants to become the member, the shares has to be acquired or transferred to that member. Then only the person becomes the member of the company. Yes, am I visible? I lost the connection in between. Is the sharing also visible to you? Okay, just put it out. Okay, great. Okay, so I was discussing the disadvantages of a company form. So what are the disadvantages of the company form? That there are formalities and expenses. There is share capital. Then there is a stamp duty. There is a registrar of fees to the registrar of companies. So there are a lot of formation and expenses. Plus there are continuing expenses like statutory audit fees. There are a lot of filings which are being involved and so on. So basically, lot of expenses are recurring expenses attached to. There are compliances, then like there are board meetings, there should be a board meeting, there is a general meeting which is involved. So there are continuing disclosures and there are continuing compliances in case of a company. What are the other disadvantages? There is a separation from the control and ownership. So, like for examples, in case of a company, there can be now there are companies which are professionally managed that the owners are not into control. Like for example, if I own 10% stake in a company, it is need not be that I am also on the board of directors of the company. The board of directors or the management can be different and control or the ownership can be different. So that is how it that's why if you see the concept which is always used is there is in case of a company form there is divorce between the ownership and control, or there is a divorce between the ownership and management of the company. So that is one of the disadvantages, that if you are owning that ownership, sole proprietary, you are the sole owner and you are the owner of the company. You are responsible for the management of the company. But uh, in case of the company form, it need not be likewise. Okay, am I visible to all of you? Some are saying I'm not visible. Some are saying yes, some are saying no. That means you can check the connection at your end. Okay, because there are people who are saying yes, I'm visible. So greater burden of tax. Then there are tax of obviously taxation which is involved. That in case of sole proprietorship it's different, but in case of companies they are taxed. And what we have seen is there is a detailed winding up procedure. So it can't be just like a shop. It's easy, right? I'm not doing business. I shut the shutter and I'm saying, okay, close the shop. But that's not so easy in case of a company. If you just put the shutter down, that doesn't mean that the company is no longer into existence or so on. It has to be a detailed winding up process which has to be followed. So this is what we have seen, the disadvantages. Any questions on this? I'll take, or I'll move to the next topic. Members of company includes only shareholders, or it includes both shareholders as well as directors. So like I told you, it is not a compulsion that all the members has to occupy a director, because imagine a company like Infosys where there are lakhs of shareholders. Do you think all can be on the board or management of the company? The answer is no. So some can hold 10 shares, 1 shares, 100 shares, 1000 shares, and so on. So it is not necessary that all the members obviously have to be on the board. But in case of private limited company where there are only two members, the likelihood or the most practical aspect is they both are generally the directors of the company. So for example, husband wife, the husband wife are the members of the company, they own 50-50% shares, so they also become the directors of the company in real life scenarios. So generally, if you see, typically in private limited company, the members and the shareholders and the directors, they are most of the time the same, but not compulsory. Okay, it can be possible that the members are entirely different and the directors are entirely different. I hope you get this. Okay, we can't some again jump on to some different topic of logical reasoning. Okay, we have to complete the portion and there is a link of thoughts. So now since we are on the company law, we will let's focus on company law, and then we will take tomorrow and day after tomorrow, we can take logical reasoning separately. So if we are able to finish company law today, let's try to finish that. Okay. Okay, so disadvantage, I'll again quickly take the disadvantages are formation and expenses, too many of formalities, corporate disclosure. If you see a listed company, they are disclosing so many things because there is public money involved. The public have invested in such companies. So if you see the times you may see the balance sheets which are being printed, the financial statements, the audited statements. There are too many disclosures which they have to make to the stock exchange website of the company, disclosures in change in shareholding or change in directors. So there are a lot of disclosures which they have to make to the public because there is a lot of public money involved. Separation of ownership, which we saw. Greater social responsibility means the CSR, which we are going to study. The CSR is applicable only for companies. So the LLPs, the sole proprietorship, the partnerships, they can do social responsibility things, but the CSR is only in the Companies Act. So that's why the CSR is only applicable to the companies, and of course, after meeting the thresholds which are prescribed, but that's what it means by greater social responsibility. So the companies have more social responsibility than the partnerships or the LLPs or the sole proprietorship. Greater tax burden is easy, and detail winding up is we have already seen. So I guess up to here everything is clear. And now I'll go to the next topic in Companies Act. So the history you can study on your own. I'm going to now take very important concepts. So please concentrate because this is the very core information on Companies Act, and it's very important again from your FAQs and MCQs perspective. And please concentrate because this requires a lot of legal understanding or legal interpretation, what we call, and that's why it becomes very important for you to concentrate. So we have seen that there can be various companies. Now we will go to the definitions of company. Again, I'm saying please concentrate because the definitions are not so easy to understand if you are not understanding the legal interpretation of such definitions. Okay, so please concentrate. History you're going to do on your own. Okay. Uh, Private company. Now we come to the different types of companies. So different types of companies. What are the different types of companies? The first and the most important types of companies distinction is private company and public limited company. Now, how to identify whether a particular company is a private limited company or a public limited company? It can be identified by way of just naming the names of the company. So if I say A private limited, so if I'll help you in the chat box also, if I say that there is A private limited, means what? It is A private limited is a private limited company. And if I say it is A limited, then what? It is a limited company, that is a public limited company. So the public limited company can use just limited after their name, and in case of private limited company, it has to use private limited. Now, if I say a OPC private limited. So AOPC Private Limited is what? It is a OPC, that is one person company. So by just looking at the name, you can identify what is the nature of company. Now, what is the difference again between public and private company? So private restriction on the number of members or shareholders. So in case of a private limited company, minimum 2 and maximum 200. So 2 is the minimum number of members, that in case of a private limited company, it has to be minimum 2 members. What is the exception to this? Anybody can tell? What is an exception where 2 members are not required? Anybody? Yes, right, Rupali. It's OPC, where one person company requires only one member. But please understand, it is also a private limited company. OPC is essentially a private limited company, but the only feature which is not applicable of a private limited company, and of course there are other liberties also, exemptions also, but what is the most important thing is, in case of a one person company, there is only one member and not 2 members or 200. So OPC, the restriction on membership, it's only one. So if we distinguish or look the member types of company from number of members perspective, we have OPC, where there is only one person or one member involved. Then there is private limited company, where other than OPC, OPC is also a private limited company. Other than OPC private limited company, there has to be minimum 2 number of members, maximum can go up to 200 numbers. And there is public limited company, where there can be minimum 7 number of members, and yes, maximum can be unlimited, but minimum is 7. So I hope you get this from the distinction of the number of members. Now, in case of directors, OPC can have only one director, but there can be more than one directors also, because in the OPC, the main aspect or the important key point is on the membership and not on the directorship. Okay, so OPC can have more than one directors. I hope this is clear. OPC can have more than one directors. The restriction is only the number of members. Similarly, it can, but since it has only one member, it can have the liberty of having just only one director. So in all practical reasons and all practical purposes, if I am the member of the OPC, generally I also become the director of the company, so that I don't have to, there is no, again, there is a management which is different from the ownership and so on. So that is possible. But in case of a private limited company, there has to be minimum 2 directors, which is not the OPC. Minimum number of directors is 2. And in case of a public limited company, the minimum is 3. Perfect. So that is how the distinction works in case of the private, public, and OPC. Now we are going to see the definition of private company. Let's focus on the definition of private company. So, private company means a company having a minimum paid up capital as may be prescribed and which by its articles. So, what is important is the minimum paid up capital is being mentioned, but now there is no such thing by virtue of ease of doing business. By virtue of ease of doing business, now there is no compulsion that how much should be the paid up capital. Earlier there was 1 lakh and 5 lakh, but that is gone. Now, theoretically, you can have incorporate a company with also rupee 1. Theoretically, because like I said you, there are formation expenses and so on. But otherwise, theoretically, it can be also rupees 1. Uh, so guys, let's focus on the definition. You can ask many questions and I would be happy to answer. But if you deviate, then we will not get to the basics of it. Okay. So let's focus. I know you have got many questions and I'm also very happy to answer those questions. I'll take it in we have a question and answer session separately on, I guess, Friday. So if we are not able to, I'm not able to answer in this session, we can take in that session. But let's focus on only what is there in your syllabus right now. There are many things which I would love to take, but it's not in your syllabus. So I'm not answering that questions which are not in your syllabus. Okay. So private limited company means a company having a minimum paid up share capital and which by its articles, this is very important, restricts the right to transfer of its shares, then except in case OPC limits the number of its member to 200, we have seen. And how this 200 is to be counted, or how you're going to count whether that company has complied at 200 number of members or not. So what you have to exclude over here is a person. So in case of joint shareholding, basically if I'm holding shares jointly with my mother, so it's not that we'll be treated as 2 members, we'll be treated as only 1 member. So I'm holding jointly with my mother. That means I will be treated only 1 shareholder for that 200 number of counting. Okay, I'll not be counted as 2, but I'll be counted as 1. And what we are going to see is a person who are in employment of the company, and provided that where 2 or more vagera vagera, provided further that a persons who are in the employment of the company, basically who are the employees of the company and they hold shares, and the persons who are having formerly in employment of the company were members of the company while in that employment and have continued, and prohibits any invitation to public to subscribe to the share. So basically the people who are into the employment of the company and they are holding shares, and the people who have left the employment of the company but they were holding shares at the time of when they were employees of the company. Yes, that can be ESOPs, that can be shares which they have acquired, possible. So, and the most important thing is prohibits any invitation to subscribe for any security. So that's complete no. They cannot, if there's an MCQ that A is a private limited company and it's distributing pamphlets that invest in our company, invest in our company. So is that allowed? The answer is no, because that is they are being prohibited to giving invitation to the public to subscribe for securities. If they want, they can get converted into public limited company and then they can do the needful. So public company means a company which is not a private company. So if it doesn't satisfy the definition of private company, it becomes a public company. So like it wants to invite, subscribe, it want to exceed the 200 number of members, then it can get converted into a public limited company. And provided that a company which is a subsidiary of a company, not being a private company, shall be deemed to be a public company for the purposes of this act. So, for example, A Limited holds 62% in B Private Limited. So A Limited holds 62% in B Private Limited. So what is the status of B Private Limited? Yes. Yes, holding company, subsidiary company, perfect. So A is a holding company and B is a subsidiary company. But what about the status of, what would you call it, as a private company or a public limited company? Public. Why? Yes, please remember, even though B Private Limited I'm saying, but if A Limited, which is a public limited company, is holding 60% at more than half, so it becomes a subsidiary. Basically, it becomes a subsidiary of A Limited, and this proviso clause applies. That proviso provided that a company which is a subsidiary of a company not being a private company shall be deemed to be a public company. So it's a deemed to be, this is called as a deeming provision. So it is clothed, okay, it's like a fiction which is created, a legal fiction. It is not that, but it should be treated likewise. So it's a deeming provision. That's what we call in the legal language, that it will be deemed to be a public limited company. One person company, we have already seen. Companies with charitable objects. Now please concentrate over here. Okay, what is companies with charitable object? So this is a section 8 company, what we typically call, or a companies with charitable objects. Now what we have seen is, in case of partnerships and everything, there it is a business for profit. But I told you, and we are in the beginning, that a company entity can be such where the business of the company is not for profit. Meaning what? Does that mean it cannot have profit? No, the answer is no. It does not mean that the company cannot have profits. The most important thing is the company can have profits, but whatever profits it has to go back to the business. So, for example, if a company is into COVID care, okay, where the people who are needy and who are not able to afford a COVID treatment, and the company is into that it has been incorporated to help the people who cannot afford COVID treatment, and it is doing charity for that people. So here, now for example, if they get a sponsorship or something by which now for example they have a vaccine and they started utilizing it, and now they are earning profits out of it. So whether they can distribute it to the members of the company, the answer is no. Whatever profits they earn, that goes back to the business, and the people cannot enjoy, the members cannot enjoy the profit, because the reason being they have incorporated a company which is for charity. So the restriction is, like for example, you must have heard about various companies distributing dividend. Now for example, Pidilite Industries, if for example they have given dividend, or if it is any other Persistent or any other company which is distributing dividend. Now what does dividend means? That the company has earned profits, and that profits are being distributed to the members of the company. That is called as dividend. But in case of the Section 8 company, the profits which the company earn cannot be distributed to the members of the company, because it that is prohibited, and whatever profits they earn will go back to the same activities which the company is performing. So that is a restriction on the Section 8 company, that it has in its object. So how can you identify whether this is a Section 8 company? Because it will have in its main objects the promotion of commerce, science, arts, education, research, social welfare, religion, charity, protection, and so on. And it intends to apply its profits, if any, or other income in promoting its objects, and intends to prohibit, the word is prohibit, the payment of any dividend to its members. Yes, so that's what is Section 8 company. Yes, Section 8 company can have shareholding. It can be a company with share capital. That is not a problem. No, it is not an NGO. It is a company. Please understand, it is a company incorporated under the Companies Act. Simple. Okay. Yes, profit will be used only for the activities. Yes, they have all other compliances are applicable to them. Yes. What is NPO? I don't know what you're saying by NPO. There's no NPO concept. I don't know what you're saying. Are you saying NGO? Because there is a non-governmental organization, but that is not what it is. Like I told you, it is a company entity. NGO, again, it's a word very used for generally for non-government organization or non-charitable, charitable organizations where they do all charity activities, non-profit organization. Yes, so please understand the activities Section 8 company is essentially a company and it has all the features of the company, but it is for the object for which it is for a charitable uh, activities. Okay, so yes, it is not for profit organization. The reason being the profits, but the profits of which are applied for the activities. Yes, that's right. Government company. Now, government company means what? A company not less than 51% of the paid up capital is held by government. So it can be a central government, it can be a state government, it can be combination of all and so on. Foreign company. So foreign company means a company or a body corporate incorporated outside India, which has a place of business in India and conducts any business activity in India in any other manner. So basically it is a company which is incorporated outside India and but it is having some place of business in India or it is having some business activities in India. What is associate company? Associate company in relation to another company means a company in which other company has a significant influence. Now, what do you mean by significant influence? It means control of at least 20% of voting power. Now, for example, A Limited holds 30% in B Limited. Relation between A and B. Yes, what is the relation between A and B? Associate, because it is more than 20%, but less than 50. Absolutely, because it cannot be a subsidiary because it is not having more than half. So it is not a subsidiary, but it is having more than 20%. So that's why it is an associate company. Great. Now, holding company and subsidiary company. So holding company means what we have seen is first we'll understand what is subsidiary, then we'll easily understand what is holding company. So how can a holding subsidiary relation exist between two companies? If if that company controls the composition of board. Now how control is established by composition of board? By when there is a majority of board, whether that appointment and renewal. For example, A Limited has by virtue of some agreement, it can remove or appoint all the board of directors of B Private Limited. Okay. So then that becomes a holding subsidiary because the majority of the board of directors can be appointed or removed by the A Limited company. So even if it has got no shareholding, but it can have control over the composition of the board of directors, then also it is called as, then also the holding subsidiary exists. Okay, so it need not be only by virtue of shareholding, it can be by way of a control of composition of board. Again, I'll help you. Please understand, whenever there is a or which is used in the statute, it means either of the conditions has to be satisfied. For example, if I tell you that tomorrow everybody has to wear red or blue, okay, what does that mean? You can wear either red or you can wear either blue, or means, and in the statute also either of the condition has to be satisfied in order to have that. And if I say day after tomorrow you have to wear black and white, now what does that mean? Black and white means both black and white should be present. Okay, so that's what is the understanding when you understand a legal definition. Whenever there is a or is placed in between, it means either of it can be satisfied, but there is an and in between, then both the conditions has to be satisfied. So in case of a subsidiary, in order a company can be a subsidiary, it can be by way of a composition, control of the composition of the board, or it can be by way of exercise of control of more than one half of the total voting power. Okay, now I'll give you examples and you have to tell me what is the relation. So A Limited holds 52% in B Limited. So what is the relation? A Limited and B Limited, holding subsidiary. A is the holding company and B is the subsidiary. Now B Limited holds 40% and A Limited holds 13% in C Limited. Now what is the relation between A, B and C? Yes, what is the relation between A and C? First, tell me what is the relation between A and C? Is there a relation basically? No, A is the holding company of C, because I told you what B is holding. Sorry, because of that chat now I've lost the percentages which I had quoted. Wait, let me find that chat. What's the exact percentage I mentioned? Yes, so I mentioned you A Limited Yes, I told you A Limited holds 52% in B Limited. Okay, so because having more than half of the total voting power. Clear? I guess everybody is clear with that. Now, further I said that B Limited holds 40%. Wait, don't chat because I'll lose that. B Limited holds 40% in C Limited. B Limited holds 40% and A Limited holds 13% in C Limited. So what is the relation between A and B? It is a holding subsidiary. Now that subsidiary of A holds 40% and A individually holds 13%. So that 40 plus 13 will get clubbed. And that's why C Limited will also become the subsidiary of A Limited. And this is exactly what is being written here. Either at its own, that is A Limited is holding own 13%. Its individual percentage is 13%, or together with one or more of its subsidiary. So together or with B, it is holding more than 50%. Did you get this? Yes. So I'll explain again. Just don't chat so that there is the queue gets lost and I'll forget the percentages. So here what I'm trying to say, A Limited holds 50% in B Limited. I hope everybody is clear that A Limited is a holding company and B Limited is a subsidiary company. Okay. I guess everything is clear. Everybody is clear up to this. Now further I said that B Limited holds 40% in C Limited. Okay, so B Limited holds 40% in C Limited. So you are right that what is the relation between B and C is of associate company. That's right, because it's holding more than 20%, but it is not a subsidiary of B. So the relation between B and C is that of the associate company. That C company is an associate company of B, which is perfect. Now I'm asking you, what is the relation between A and C? So what is the relation between A and C is that of again a holding subsidiary, because A Limited 13% in C Limited, right? But plus subsidiary. So this is the words highlighted. either at its own. So either at its own it is holding 13%, or together with one or more of its subsidiaries. So together with its subsidiary B, it is holding more than 50%. So 40 plus 13 gives 53%, and that's why there is a relation of holding subsidiary even between A and C. So I hope you get it. So A is the holding company of B and A is holding company of C as well, because on its own plus its subsidiary it is holding more than 50%, and that's why A is the holding company of B Limited and A is also the holding company of C Limited. So I hope you get this. Great. Now we have understood what is holding subsidiary. I'll quickly take you to the other definitions and we'll end the session today, and we'll continue tomorrow again with the remaining company law and of course the logical reasoning. So let me complete quickly the other definitions. Very easy. Small company, it is other than public company. So basically it is a private limited company. It has to be a private limited company. Then there is a turnover requirement and a paid up capital requirement, that it cannot exceed 50, the paid up share capital does not exceed 50 lakh or such amount which shall not exceed again 10 crores. So there is a threshold which they have given for in order that a company to qualify a small company. And there is a and. Okay, now there is a and means both the conditions has to be satisfied. Turnover cannot exceed the amount of rupees 2 crores of rupees. And of course, it should not be a holding subsidiary. It should not be a Section 8 company, and it should not be a company or a body corporate governed under a special act. That is what a small company means. Dormant company means, again, it is a company formed, registered for a future project or holding an asset of the company, or there is no significant transaction, and it can apply that it is a dormant company. Inactive company means a company which has not been carrying on the business for the last 2 years and it has not filed any financial statements. So dormant company can have minimum number of 3 directors in case of public and 2 and etc. Nidhi company means a company which is incorporated for the object of cultivating the habit of thrift or savings amongst the members, and that's why you incorporate as the Nidhi companies. Producer company. The producer company is basically, if you see, the producer companies is a special section 581A1 of the 1956 Act, and the membership of a producer company is open to such people who themselves are the primary producer. So basically the farmers, where they are into this farming and agriculture. So the producer companies are incorporated by farmers where they kind of have the agricultural produce. So important feature is open to such people who themselves are the primary producers. And the list of activities they have given, that what can be the objects of producer company. If you see the agricultural produce, production and distribution of the produce and so on. So that is what the producer company means. And NBFC is a company which is engaged in the business of loans, advances, acquisition, shares, so hire purchase agreements, loan financing and such kind of activities. But it is essentially a company. It is being regulated highly by the Reserve Bank of India. So by this, we come to the end of this session today. And we will meet tomorrow as per the same timing. Sorry. So I guess this was helpful for you. And let me know if you have any doubts. I can take the doubts which we have. We can take it tomorrow. but please don't ask again the same doubts, okay? So that we will move on, otherwise we'll be stuck to the same chapter because this is a revision, okay? Let me see if there are any questions which I can take it today. Okay. I don't see something which is related to your right now what we discussed. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. So I don't see the questions which we have already answered. So yeah. Okay. Chalo, bye bye. Take care and we'll meet tomorrow, same time. Bye bye. Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you.